Today on Dear Constance, we are going off script. Let me explain. Before I stumbled into the idea of Dear Constance, I had originally intended to do a show called Lionhearted, When Dreamers Become Doers. And that was born out of this idea to shine the light on what I call ordinary people doing extraordinarily kind things. For many years, I've been extremely fascinated by Jose Andres, the founder of World Kitchen. If you don't know him, he's a Spanish chef who, after listening to the news and the story about the devastation in Puerto Rico, literally jumped on a plane the next day. He was so blown away by what was happening there. He said to himself, I don't know how I can help, but I know how to cook. That call to action that landed in his heart became World Kitchen. Today, World Kitchen has served over 30 million meals in devastation zones around the world. I would just sob when I heard that story, and I heard it more than once. And I was asking myself, what is this? Why am I so moved? The truth of the matter is, I've often felt that I'm sitting courtside in life. I've dreamed of being gripped by some big vision. And so when I examined what was going through my head and through my heart after seeing the stories about Jose Andres, I decided that maybe my job was to shine the light on these people, these ordinary people doing extraordinarily kind things. There are many stories like that, and I'm certainly not the first person who wanted to highlight them. So this conversation was the very first thing I ever recorded, and it's so beautiful I want to share it with you. It's a conversation with my dear friend Talia Shafir. Talia is what I call a key member of the Constance Wisdom Well. As listeners may or may not know, I lost my father, my mother, and my sister over a 7-year period. And Talia was someone I turned to for support and grounding and wisdom to help me make sense of what was happening in my life. She's sassy and funny and wise and very, very kind, as you'll see here. It's a story of an experience she had with a Holocaust survivor and her daughter some 30 years ago in California. And she had a full circle moment this past year with the daughter. I believe the mother has since passed away. I'm not sure, actually. So before we move on, let me just say this. My intention behind Lionhearted when I was creating it was that if even just one person would be inspired to move into action, to err on the side of kindness and generosity, it was worth it. I think we just never know what grips a person to act, what I call the tipping points. I love those tipping points. Like, what is it that makes someone move into action? And it's not just about acts of kindness. I'm very intrigued by those moments when people are just gripped to take action. In this case, I'm talking about acts of kindness, but I'm also intrigued by people that are just somehow moved that moment when they decide to stop drinking or smoking or to lose weight or to get healthy, whatever it is. I had just decided to focus on the acts of kindness and being moved into action. And that's why the subtitle was going to be When Dreamers Become Doers. I think you get the idea. So without further ado, it is my great honor to introduce you to my friend, Talia Shafir. I hope you enjoy it. Hi, Talia.
Hi there, Constance.
I'm so excited to have this chat with you. I've been thinking about you for the last few days, and you're just the perfect person. I will tell you, you're the first person that I get to speak with. So thank you for letting me feel my way forward on this.
Yeah, I'm honored.
So before we start, I invited you to come today because I know bits and pieces of this story of something you did, sort of a goodwill, good deed thing that really inspired me. And I thought about it for so long. I thought I'd invite you to tell us about it. Before we start, it might be an opportunity to tell people a little bit about yourself. Besides being my buddy.
Well, this iteration of my life, I'm what you might call a somatic psychologist. I have a PhD in somatic and spiritual psychology. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist as well as a somatic movement therapist and educator. And I address trauma and post traumatic stress and developmental issues in adults, adult attachment with somatic approaches to healing and growth. And I also do some executive coaching, mostly high level executives who are trying to change the way they approach their tasks and also maybe looking at retirement and how is that happening. So that's
Oh,
what
I think that's a subject for a whole different chat because that is coming up with a lot of people I'm talking to. The last 3 days, 3 different people have told me about very exciting new things they're doing. I called them in their old hat, in their old position, and they're like, "Oh, I don't do that anymore, but I'd be happy to help you." And I just find that so fascinating because when I left my business, people kept asking me, "Well, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?" And I have language for it now that I didn't have then, but it's about the dance with uncertainty. And as you get older, I think that really, truly we're invited to dance with uncertainty, and it's extremely uncomfortable. We'll leave that for another time. So thank you for sharing your background. You do have a clinical practice, so you speak with lots of different people.
Well, yes, all over the world. So now that Zoom is a thing, it was always a thing for me. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's interesting that you say something about transition and the not knowing. My philosophy is just, don't do something. Don't do something. Just stand there. And why transitions are difficult. And this actually is a segue into what I'm going to talk about, this thing that occurred that I was a major activating part of, is about what kind of resilience to change, agency, and a level of feeling of safety does one bring, which is what resilience really is, to the task of actually reimagining yourself in a different context. And how will I be? Do I just stay here because it's a familiar, it's an expected environment? Or can I go into something else and reinvent myself? Still stay me, you know?
Does that have to do with safety? Explain what you mean by the word safety in this context.
Well, when you're talking about secure attachment, it's composed of two things. Internalized secure base is a sense of agency, I can, and a haven of safety. I feel protected. I can protect myself. I have a sense that somebody's been watching me, watching over me, that I come away with a sense of I'm loved, I'm wanted, and there's somebody there to help, and
Mm.
I feel okay. Don't do anything, especially something new. We don't take risks really unless we feel safe enough to put enough focus on that
Yeah.
risk to be able to take that step. So, sometimes that piece of resilience needs a little support and
Uh,
shoring up, and then we can do it.
It's really interesting to hear the connection between security and agency. Agency is one of my favorite words, and I'm very intrigued by how even the most privileged, even the most successful people can feel a loss of agency or a disconnect with their sense of agency in the strangest ways. Let's move on to you because thank you for the background because I think it's very relevant to this particular conversation. So I've asked Talia to come tell us about a project she shared, and I'll just let you tell us about it. What I'd like to hear about, though, is what you did and how it came about, why you did it, if there was a tipping point or if there was a moment. I'm very intrigued by tipping points. That moment when we move out of our head into action, and it could be about anything. People that are obese or sex addicts, I'm very intrigued by that moment when we actually move and step into action. And that may not be relevant to your story. So take it away.
Okay. Well, this in its barest form is about a successful GoFundMe campaign. I have a longtime friend by the name of Davida, who I first met while working at a women's music festival in California in the 80s. And, it's not usual that you hear classical piano at a music festival. You don't, you associate a music festival with heavy rock and lots of drums and other things. But Vita is a classical pianist and she played beautifully. And all of a sudden, I'm working and I hear this piano rehearsal going on and went to the performance. And it turned out that her mother was there. Actually, I think I'm conflating two things. The first time I saw her, it was just she who was playing. The second year, her mother came back with her. And her mother is also a pianist. But it's not that simple because it starts with her mother's story, which is her mother was a student at the music conservatory in Warsaw, in Poland, in the late 30s. And she had to go into the conservatory hiding the fact that she was a Jew. And when Hitler invaded Poland, I think maybe we're talking 1939, I believe, she, of course, had to leave. She had graduated, I think, and then was waiting for her recital, her debut on stage. when she was deported. And
This is the
she
mother.
this is the mother, and
Yeah.
she ended up in Auschwitz. And so, there are many stories, and her testimony is recorded and et cetera. But I think the thing that's germane here is that she was in Auschwitz a few days when she was approached by one of the capos, those were the Jews who were working as guards for the Germans. And, it happened to be the commandant's birthday. And they were looking for somebody to play happy birthday for the commandant. And she said, "Oh, well, you're a piano, you can play." So she brought her to play. And when she went to play, she froze.
Oh my
Play.
gosh.
And the commandant came over and stabbed her in the breast. Just stabbed her, and we don't know exactly. I don't know whether it was in the front or the back or whatever it was. Anyway, and she was kind of dragged off, and the couple felt so bad that she had her, and there was a negotiation. So it was her and her mother, her and her sister and her best friend, that she would only go if all three of them went, and they were transferred to a factory in Germany. I don't know whether it was the one in Dresden or where exactly, but after a while, so she only spent a little bit in Auschwitz. And then she was, she was also on that death march, that famous death march. Anyway, they all survived everything. And she was liberated by the Russians in 1945, I believe it was. And the first thing she asked for was approached the Russian soldier, asked him for a pen and a notebook so she could write down all the things that she had been, all her memories from the camps and everything else that she had actually, and poetry that she had written. And she'd done it to Chopin. She remembered all the notes and the music to Chopin, and she had used that as a memory guide. Anyway, mother had never had her debut. So here she was, the mother and the daughter playing at the concert. Yeah, this
California.
was in California, yeah. Also talking about the mother's experience, and her mother actually read from the Diary of Anne Frank. We actually have a recording. It's quite moving to hear the mother read from that and say, this should never happen again. And you hear that voice, and you've heard those words, but not through that voice, let me tell you. So that was where I met the two of them, and I was very moved by that. And I just decided that her mother should have her debut concerts, and that they should, they should have their day on stage. And so I got to work arranging for a concert tour up and down the West Coast, and they did 8 concerts. That was about 82, 83, something like that. The poster for our concerts was a very interesting one.
Let
And
me just stop you there, just if I may, just for 1 second, and ask you, you know, you just decided. What does that mean?
well, I was at that time I actually had a production company.
Oh, okay.
I was producing music, I was producing concerts, I was repping
Okay. Okay.
women musicians.
Okay.
And yeah, sorry, yeah. And so I knew how to do that, and I had that, and I thought, "Oh, hey, they should do this. I know how to do this." Can we pause for a moment? I just want to read a very short something for you. So this sets the stage for, why did I get up and do this GoFundMe? I think this is a good foundation. This is a poem written by Davida about her mother, Pena Flint Gottlieb, Goodman, Helene, daughter of Esther, daughter of Manus, sister of Caroline, sister of Jacob, sister of Lazar. From a family of 50, only you have survived. 35 years of memories and nightmares, each memory a tear, a tightening in your chest. 25 years old, and you watched your father beaten. 25 years old, and you tried to save him, who was now insane, out of his mind. Yet you remained in yours. How? How did you survive? 27 years old, and you carried the music of Chopin under your arm to Auschwitz. 27 years old, Dr. Mengele pointed his finger, and you watched your mother walk the other way and disappear forever. Tell me, how did you survive? That very same night, you gathered the women and sang Kol Nidre. You gathered the women, your spirit that belonged to another world. the world of art and dreams and music, still alive and helping others find strength. It was your nature. When someone offered you a chance to escape, you said, "No, I won't go without my sister-in-law, my aunt, and my girlfriend." In so doing, against all odds, you saved them all. Kenya, woman of deep melancholy eyes, how afraid I was of your pain, how much you needed me. I was life to you. I was joy to you. I was proof of your victory over Hitler. I was afraid of you and how much you looked to me for nourishment. I was just a little baby, and your hunger went far beyond anything I could do. You needed to love and be loved with a desperation that suffocated me. And so I grew. I grew walls to keep out the love that frightened me, and I grew horrors to match yours as we locked in battle, to match the anger that would have been suicide had you known it back then. You saw my anger as the Nazi monster with which you had to plead for life. No, I am your daughter, daughter of your own flesh. I am not the enemy. I do not wish you were dead. You were afraid, afraid of losing me. No place away from you was safe enough for your child. No place was safe. You were afraid of losing me through my silence and the ever-growing gap between us. Yes, I rebelled. I rebelled against anything that had to do with you. I rebelled against being a pianist. I rebelled against being a Jew. I rebelled against being manipulated into guilt because of your pain. But still, I thought I was to blame. And I felt like a monster for hurting someone who had already suffered so much. I rebelled, and yet here I am today, no longer afraid of loving you or losing myself. I cry for all the years I couldn't understand. I cry for all the years I couldn't freely love you. You who need so much love and compassion to counteract the hunger and self-hate. Somehow I've learned to welcome your tears and your stories. Today I sing praises to your strength, your courage, and your wit. How did you survive? Was it chance? Was it a miracle? For 1 year, in spite of hunger beyond imagination, you refused to eat the soup that would have made you sterile. My very existence is indeed a miracle. How did you survive? I grope for answers to this elusive question, but without knowing the answer, this I do know, that you have given me whatever it is that you had, that if it were to happen to me, and if I were favored by chance, I too would survive. By a twist of fate, music saved you back there in Auschwitz. Is it a coincidence that through music we have spoken when there was no other way? I am so much your daughter, Henya Flint, Gottlieb Goodman. Our lifestyles are different, but our essence is the same. I celebrate how much I am like you. Your strength is my strength. Your music is my music. I am of your flesh, and I am independent. Today I find myself living out the life you would have led, but it is my life too. I choose it freely. And is it a coincidence that today I am 27 years old and I play Chopin?
It's incredible. Wow.
Yeah.
Just incredible. So beautiful.
Yeah.
Oh,
And so this was much more than a concert tour to me.
boy.
It just grabbed me. It was just, I didn't even think about it. I thought, well, you need a concert. What do you mean you didn't get your concert? Okay, we're just going to do a concert. We're going to do a concert tour. I worked very hard on that, and they did it. And
Did you know this whole story when you were doing that?
yeah, I watched the mother and the daughter. They talked about that on
Oh, I
thi-
see.
and actually, Davida actually read that poem as an introduction to playing. Then she and her mother got out and they sat at the piano and did a duet. I mean, her mother was really a force and funny, and she was amazing.
So
Fast
beautiful. Thank you
forward.
for sharing that. That was amazing.
Yeah.
Really, really special.
Yeah, it is special, and I thank you for letting me do that. So fast forward, after a couple of years, I don't know, Davida moves away. We sort of lost track of one another, and things went on. And every once in a while, I'd hear something, but it wasn't until, oh, I don't know, maybe like 8 years ago that I finally found somebody who knew where she was. When I did that concert tour, I had photographs because we were putting materials together and things. And I came across this envelope of her photos, some of which were childhood photos. And I thought, I got to get these back to her. Where is she? And so I called a friend who actually was still in touch with her. And so we got in touch again. And we started to talk again and catch up and everything. And it turns out that DeVita was living with undiagnosed, which she later found out, for many, many years and had long ago sold her piano and all her music to pay for medical expenses and wasn't playing. And every once in a great while, she spent most of the time bedridden. And I think maybe a couple of times she would be at somebody's house that had a piano and she'd sit down and do a little something, get up. But, we're talking like maybe 3 times in the whole time, 37 years. So this woman does not play the piano. And she's in great pain, and it's really affecting her nervous system and everything else, but doesn't know what's going on and tries all kinds of things, some of which help, some of which made it worse. So when I first talked to her, she said, "Oh, no, I don't play piano anymore. I don't do that anymore. That's not something I do." And I was surprised. And then I joined a
Accomplished pianist in her own
yeah.
right.
Oh, yes. She's playing the piano since she's old enough to reach the keys,
Yeah.
right?
So it
And
wasn't just a hobby. She was actually,
oh, no,
yeah.
no. She was entering competitions as a
Yeah.
kid and very, very talented. And she also wrote a lot of her own music. She did a lot of improvisation, but she also was trained classically. And she was also a professional piano tuner, and she did that. So all of that disappeared. So I became part of a group that helped to support her in various ways. And part of it was like I found that she needed some puzzles, right? To help the brain rewire. That's what that illness had done to her. And so we got to talking, and about a year and a half ago, she had actually been diagnosed. Somebody helped her get with a doctor who actually knew what was going on and bring her into a very supportive community group for healing. And she was really getting better. And she was able to sit up. The whole thing was she couldn't sit up. And so in the meantime, all the muscles that help you sit up,
Yeah.
everything was going to pot here. But she was working hard and coming along physically. She was much better. And she started to say, I think maybe I might be able to play the piano again, and I may be able to do this. So I'm thinking, oh, well, that's cool. But well, hey, maybe I'll go to Costco and get you one of those, I didn't say that to her. That's what I'm thinking. And so I said, okay, well, okay, what kind of a piano do you think you want? That's me. Okay. What kind of a piano do you think you want? And she said, well, I'm going to look. I said, I'm going to look for it. I'm going to do some research. So does some research. And of course, the next thing I know, it's what she wants is a digital piano this time because nobody's shipping or getting it kind of a Steinway. So it turned out to be a stage concert digital piano, which was around $8,000.
The piano that she found that she wanted.
Yes.
Okay.
And when she said that, I thought to myself, oh God, I'm so glad I didn't say I was thinking of getting her something, a Casio at Costco. I thought, oh God. And I was laughing at myself. And so I said, okay, well, now we need a GoFundMe campaign. And I'm going to do that for you. And at first, I've been in marketing. I was a director of sales and marketing for a couple of companies in Silicon Valley in the 80s. So, I'm a marketer. Once a marketer, always a marketer. So I was like, okay, we're going to do this. So I get a picture of her, which I already had, and I type out a little thing for GoFundMe. And she looks at it and she goes, okay, well, I have some ideas. And I realize, oh, wait a minute. You are not, you really are getting better. You want to input in this. And, it's okay. So now this is a whole different thing than I thought. And I'd never done a GoFundMe campaign before. And so together we put together the story. And then I began to lose interest a little bit, lose energy, because I didn't feel the energy coming from her that she was really ready. And so a few months went by and I would answer her, but it wasn't really front and center for me. And all of a sudden, I kept getting, how do you like this? And here, I want to put this in. And all of a sudden, I felt all this energy coming at me. And I thought, oh, she's ready. And the minute I felt that she was ready, I was like, okay, I'm ready. Now, it, yeah, I have to, as I look back, at this whole thing, I have to laugh because I have a pretty full practice and I work a lot. And I don't always think of myself as having a lot of time to do anything else. It's like I have done workshops and things, and occasionally people will say, "Can you write this chapter for my book?" Or "How about writing an article?" And I was like, "Okay," and I'll do it. This, I was like, "I'm on it." And so she had from this supportive group that she was in, many people who wanted to help her with it. Of course, it wasn't that alone was not enough to get a piano. So I started a real marketing campaign with everyone I knew and some people that I had some professional connections with, but that I knew them long enough and well enough that I felt that I could ask them if they minded and wanted to see what I was working on. And several did come in, and people that we didn't even know picked it up. People from all over, which is exactly what happened when I did the original concerts. There were people from the gay community. There were people from the feminist community. There were people from the Jewish religious community. There were people who just, it was a combination of every people coming together that wouldn't necessarily all come together. And so what happened was that suddenly, miraculously, there was this time to do this thing. And I can only explain it energetically. We launched the campaign at the end of May, I believe, and kept it going, thanking everybody. I kept up with the thank yous every day. I worked on updates. And very shortly after we began, in June already, we had enough money to actually order the piano and the speakers. Now, the campaign was not only for that, it was also for therapy and very special piano instruction that she didn't need to be taught how to play piano, obviously, but she needed some help in strengthening her fingers and
Yeah, like a rehabilitation.
rehabilitation in that. And she really didn't know if what she could play, how she could play. It was a real risk. And she'd never worked with a digital piano before. It was a whole thing. So anyway, we were able to order that and we kept going to get her money. And I called on several colleagues of mine in the somatic movement therapeutic world and said, okay, here, can you do this? I called on people in the body mind centering world. In fact, the person who established body mind centering, Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, picked up the phone herself and I told her about it. And she said, oh, and she had somebody who was a piano teacher who gone through her education, so also knew about body, but who also taught piano. So she's working with her. So things came together. Within less than 3 months, Davida had a deadline. She had organized a talent show for her whole international group, her healing group, right? And she was going to have a talent show. And so that was her deadline. That talent show was like at the end of July. And I was thinking, what? That took guts, I said, okay. And got the piano, started working with it, practicing. It was a whole, never mind the illness and what not playing for 37 years did. But it was also like, what do I remember? Can I do? What can I do? How will my body respond? Well, it was pretty amazing. By the end of July, we had raised almost $11,000.
Wow.
And, it was done. And yeah, it was pretty amazing. And, what was fueling this? It wasn't just, this is a worthy person who, who needs an instrument. It was a feeling of, no, this is not right. This person she hasn't played. No, she needs her piano back. There's something about that piano and the music, and when she talks in her poem about her mother, what sustained you, the art, the music, through everything, the music cuts through adversity. And I was hell bent on returning the instrument of the music that still was there in her and intergenerationally that had get that instrument of expression. And on October 15th of this year, she invited everybody to her 70th birthday party and created a program and played. Some of it was pre-recorded, some of it she played live, and she put it up on YouTube.
That's so cool. That is so cool. One of the things that's coming up for me as you're telling the story is I love what you were saying about how you were waiting for her energy. You could feel that maybe she was talking but wasn't quite ready. But when she was ready, that energetic exchange between you and that you got excited and that you found time. I know that you do a lot of work and you have a full schedule and that you found that time to make it happen.
Well, it's funny when I hear you say the phrase found time, and I suddenly realized, no, 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 I redistributed my time and energy.
I like that word. That's a
That's
great word.
that's what happened. Suddenly that became really important. And I wasn't going to ignore the other people I take care of or my work. But suddenly that came to the fore with such a force that I realized, I just have to move, if I have the room, I just have to move a couple of pieces of furniture
Yeah.
around.
Yeah, I love that word redistribute. The other thing that came up to me as I'm listening to your story, such a beautiful, beautiful stories. I see the tipping point I was telling you at the beginning. I love when people just move into action. And I liked the way your tipping point was actually when you came into that your energy met hers. It was like a co-creation sort of. It wasn't some
Absolutely.
altruistic act. It was wanting to help your friend, but it was also coming into an alignment with her where you kind of co-created her coming out or her coming back into herself. The other thing that struck me as you were telling the story is, you know, as we said at the beginning, I love this idea of agency. And I'm going to go back and listen to what you said about that because I had never heard the explanation of safety as it relates to agency. I love also the concept of ripple effect. And when we do things, especially when our heart is in the right place, even small, like yours was definitely a much more important act than I knew when we started the conversation. But even small acts, that whole idea that you can never know what your kindness or what your goodwill, how it affects the other person. And as you were telling the story, I could hear the excitement also that the other people felt when you asked them to help you.
Yeah.
Here you are talking to the director of I don't know what, you said the founder of that center herself answered the call. People love to be asked for help, actually, especially when you bring the passion to it. And you have a clearly defined objective, basically. You're not just asking for quote unquote help. You're asking
Yes.
specifically for what you need.
I think that, I mean, I became a part of that story. It was infectious, and neither one of us could have done it without the other. That's the co-creation part. We needed each other to make this happen. I couldn't have done this alone, and she couldn't have done that alone. And it was interesting because the minute that energy came together, and it came together in sync in a very powerful way, other people felt it and other people joined in. It was connecting people, whether they knew each other or not, energetically through something. And what I really loved about it is there are lots of campaigns and, and things and disasters around the world and people who need help. And you give money here and there, and you never really get to see where your money went. And here I felt like I got to translate for people their money, which is an object, that goes into this campaign. And here it comes out, and here you can enjoy the fruits of your donation.
Yeah.
This
You're
is what it did. Listen here, you can listen to the music. You created part of that music.
Yeah, that is really cool. I love the story. Absolutely love the story. Thank you so much for sharing it. One of the last things I want to ask you, and I know I'm not asking you to divulge private things about the people that you are in practice with, but on the one hand, I look at you and I see you as a person who is basically in service. Obviously, you are paid, it's your job, quote unquote. But at the end of the day, you can go to bed and say, look, I helped, 5 people, 10 people, whatever your client base is, it doesn't matter. You really are a helper that it's built into the work that you do. And I'm wondering a couple questions. One is there a moment when you realize that's not enough or like that's, like this story about you finding time or redistributing your time to do yet another thing for another person I thought is interesting. And wait, the other thing I wanted to ask you was about if people in your practice, since you obviously talk to lots of people, if this idea that I have, like, I always feel a little bit like I'm sitting on the sidelines, even though, of course, I'm a kind person, even though maybe I didn't help fund a piano for somebody, but I find my ways to do nice things for people, right? Yet I feel like I'm sitting on the sidelines and I want to do something more. Is that a theme that you come across with people? I guess you could call it, I don't know whether meaning making, saying meaning making, it's kind of trivial because I make my own meaning in my life, but it's almost like this idea of sitting on the sidelines and having the opportunity or finding the opportunity to step in and help someone or to do something.
I think that, there's the rescuer archetype
Mhm.
that that we all struggle with sometimes. And when you're a professional, like, let's take firefighter or policeman or a first responder or something. You know, what makes you a matured rescuer archetype is that you know when there's a real crisis and you know when it's over so that you can pull out and go on, be ready for the next thing that comes. In everything, yes, of course I did something for my friend, but I couldn't have done it unless I had completely immersed myself, fallen in love with the project and everything. Because I became a part of it. I recognized when had become a vessel of action that it wasn't, "Oh, look at me, I'm doing this." Yes, I'm proud of the fact that when we stopped and I looked back and I went, there are days when I look and I go, "Wow, really did that." And that was amazing. But while I was doing it, it was like, "No, this has to be done. This is important." And it's not just important for the here and now, but as you hear that poem from when she was 27 years old,
Yeah.
and and you hear, yeah, you stopped and you couldn't play piano because, but you did afterward. And I thought, This is a reenactment here. And it's not supposed to stop here. It doesn't stop here. You weren't supposed to stop. You're supposed to keep going. And I become a part of it. I'm in it,
Yeah.
not doing it for somebody.
I understand that. I think that's an important distinction because one of the things that I think has held me back sometimes and maybe holds other people back is you ask yourself, do I really want to get involved? And you forget that there is maybe a moment or a contribution you can make, but it doesn't mean you're going to, be overwhelmed or marry a project that you can't get yourself out of,
Yeah,
you know?
well, and there is because look, when it's your friend and you're talking every day and you're getting to know a lot more and everything else, there is a point where you can get a little too far into it and then realize, "Ooh, this isn't helpful. I need to stop." I've
Yes,
done
but my
yeah.
point is what you were saying in the language you used before is that when you are mature or an adult in your rescuing sense, we all have it, is more grounded or knowing when it's over. Yes, knowing when it's over. I think that's an important point.
It is.
Listen, I want to thank you profusely for taking the time to share that because it was just beautiful. I didn't know how beautiful it was. I just thought it was interesting and I was inspired because, of course, I was a recipient of the GoFundMe campaign and I don't even know if I read it. It's like anything Talia's doing, I'll make a little contribution to, but I
Oh,
hadn't really wrapped my head around the story. And I didn't want to know too much. I wanted to hear it right from the horse's mouth, as we say.
did I send you the YouTube?
Yeah. Yes, I listen. That's what brought me back to calling you again. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And Davita's lucky to have a friend like you.
And I'm lucky to have a friend like her and you.
Thank you. Bye, Talia. Thanks for
Take
coming
care.
on.